This is the Happy Rant Sports podcast, in which Ted Cluck and Barnabas Piper rant about old sports, new sports, sports books, sports movies, and anything else related to sports that they feel like. Enjoy.
Hey, welcome to the Happy Rant Sports podcast. I am Ted Cluck, joined as always in studio by my good friend and fellow sports fan, Barnabas Piper. And Pipe, it is Saturday afternoon, about 3 o'clock. We have just watched Ohio State shellac Michigan. And I think we're both feeling a little down about it, not because we care so much about Michigan football. I know you don't, and I really don't either. But I think just the lack of a good game. And if I have any expectations at all as a fan, it's just that I want to be thrilled by something. I want to be delighted, like I want to see something new or something interesting. And I'll tell you, man.
Like, even if it's an ugly game, like a game that keeps my attention until the end, where you're like, all right, well, somebody's got to win.
Somebody's got to win it. Somebody's got to do something. But man, those games have been few and far between this season, Pipe. And I don't know. I think. Did you watch this is a little digression already, but did you watch the Rams-Chiefs Monday Night Football game?
I didn't get a chance to, but by all accounts, it was just that kind of game, and also, I mean, just, what was it, 54-51 final
Yeah,
score?
I mean, it was the ushering in of...
absolute track show.
Yeah, it was the ushering in of Big 12 football in the NFL, and yeah, in that, it was bittersweet.
I mean, it was, but like, didn't the Rams have 2 or 3 of their touchdowns set up by great defensive plays? Those like strip sacks and forced fumbles, things like that?
Yeah, there was still good defense played in the game at times, so it wasn't like fully a Big 12 game, but yeah, like, I feel like the sort of viewing experience that I'm looking for as a fan is a little bit few and far between this year. But, the great thing about sports is that there's always more games. There's always more games coming up to watch, and hopefully one of those games will deliver it. Now, you're not a big college football fan, are you, Pipe?
I'm not. We're getting to the time in the year when I pay a little bit more attention just because, they'll pick the teams for the playoffs, it's conference championships, etc. But I just like, it's basically... college football is preparation for pro football. So I just want to know who's going to be in the NFL draft in a few months.
Dude, exactly. And maybe what quarterbacks are going to be in the NFL draft in a few months. Not to hit too close to home on that, Pipe. But I can't help but notice that the Vikings have already lost more games with their new quarterback than they did with their supposedly mediocre quarterback last year. And, full disclosure, there's a little bit of satisfaction in that for me, but
a little bit of smugness in your voice. I can hear it.
I really hate to be a smug guy, but sometimes.
So here's the thing.
Yeah.
I think I predicted that the Vikings were going to win fewer games this year,
you
just because last year was an ultimate sort of catch lightning in a bottle. Yeah. Everyone stayed healthy, etc.
Right.
And it's the way they've lost the games that has been really frustrating because just like dumb turnovers and in the occasional play call that you're just like that didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Things were going so well, and then you tried a new thing instead of doing the things that were working.
Yeah.
I hate it when coaches outsmart themselves.
Dude, right.
So
yeah.
I haven't been real thrilled with sort of the consistency, and I don't know. They've just been sort of like a B- football team in terms of execution, and that's irritating.
Yeah, no, it totally is. And I have to again be honest in saying that because of the sort of emotional situation that I'm not at liberty to talk about on the program, I haven't watched hardly any Vikings games this season, so I've just caught highlights and recaps, and yeah, it seems to me that you guys have a Ferrari in the backfield that you're not using at all. And I don't know if that's a function of like just abysmal run blocking or you go too quickly away from Dalvin Cook. But it's been curious to me.
Well, he had a hamstring injury for, he played like 1.5 games. And then he basically was more or less shelved for about 5 games, 4 or 5 games.
During which point Latavius Murray filled in. He did Latavius Murray things. Yeah, I mean, he will always get you what's blocked and not much more, but he's an adequate guy.
He's an overpaid second running back
Sure.
who's also a high quality second running back.
Yep.
But yeah, their offensive line is the to use a brutal cliche, the Achilles heel of the team.
Yeah.
and everybody knew it going into the year.
Yeah.
And they haven't drafted. I'm trying to remember the last first round offensive lineman they drafted.
Dude, probably.
I think it was Matt.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't you have a Khalil on your offensive line and not the good one?
No, well, he's playing with his brother in Carolina now.
Okay.
But I mean that's like 8 years ago.
Yeah. It's been a while.
So you should draft a top 3 round offensive lineman probably every year.
I agree. Yeah, I agree.
In the NFL. And you should probably draft one in the first round every other year.
Dude, speaking of offensive line play, have you seen like the clips that are going viral of Quentin Nelson just killing people as an offensive guard for the Colts?
While screaming like a banshee.
Yeah.
I love
Dude,
it.
I love that guy so much.
I giggled like a little tiny schoolgirl the first time I saw that. Same. Because he was just so mean, and he was screaming, and you look at that and you go, that's the epitome of an offensive lineman.
That's right.
That is everything you want in an offensive lineman right there.
Exactly, man. Exactly. Football is the best because of stuff like that, man. But Piper, I want to get back to Achilles' heels, and I want to talk about a movie that I thought Rocky V excluded was the Achilles heel of the Rocky franchise, and that's Creed 2. So I saw Creed 2 on opening weekend. I saw it with my son and with my nephew. Expectations were sky high, sort of like the Vikings fan base for this season. So really high expectations for Creed 2, and I thought it was a bad movie. And it's funny, like our culture has no gear for anything in the middle of it was awesome or it was total garbage. And I didn't think it was total garbage, but it was definitely far from awesome. I just think it was a bad movie. And, it's funny, the cultural conversation that we're in seems to preclude anyone from saying that anything that Michael B. Jordan does is bad. We're not really in the headspace where we're saying that just yet. And he was amazing in the movie. Like, I thought he was great. I thought Tessa Thompson was great. I just thought Creed 2 was a bad movie. And I know you saw it last night, so I want your thoughts on it.
I'm in absolute and utter agreement with you in terms of their respective performances, but also like the movie just being just disappointing. It felt like a dot-to-dot emotional experience.
Yes, I totally agree.
Cue the music to tell you exactly how you should feel. Cue the one-liner that is supposed to motivate you. I mean, it was like motivational Mad Libs throughout the movie.
Dude, it totally was.
Especially with Sylvester Stallone. He's not a good actor.
Dude, no, he isn't.
Which means that he has to be inserted into a movie very judiciously to work. And in Creed, it was like pitch perfect.
It was fantastic. Creed Stallone was unbelievable, and that was and we've talked about this. That was like the wheelhouse that he needed to stay in. So let's talk about Stallone for a minute. I thought Stallone regressed from like the awesome old manness that he had embraced in Creed, and he went back to looking kind of tan and waxen and like a very old man who was trying really hard to look less old. Do you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, he looked like former bodybuilder instead of like washed up heavyweight who now runs a small Italian restaurant for kicks.
And also who's 70,
Yeah.
Like
you could see the Botox in this.
Oh, totally. Yeah, you could see the little ripples of Botox like right below his skin. Now, I agree with you on the like paint by number emotional thing where like none of the emotion was earned. Whereas I feel like in Creed, like every emotional response that you had, like they really earned it. But in Creed 2, every Stallone line I thought in Creed 2 had like a fortune cookie wisdom Lifetime movie quality about it. In which it all felt inauthentic and forced, and it was almost like everything that came out of his mouth was like this pithy like motivational thing.
Yeah, it was so bad. And the scenes where that was the worst were when you needed it to be the best. Yeah. And it was the scenes where like the emotion is hanging in the balance. You've got spoiler alert, Creed deciding whether or not he wants Rocky to coach him or train him for this fight. And that scene was just it was just flat. Yeah. It was basically like a temper tantrum by one guy and the other guy being like, "All right, I'll miss you." And
exactly.
And that was it. And then the scenes when, again, spoiler alert, Rocky manages the next fight.
Yeah.
and he's in his corner, and he's just like, this comes down to who wants it more.
Oh, dude, yeah.
I'm like, what? I mean, what? This isn't junior high.
Right.
That's the line for like, that's like the overweight middle-aged dad coaching 12-year-olds trying to get them to try harder.
Exactly. That's bad coaching what that is. Like,
it was, yeah. And yeah, also that doesn't work when you're fighting a behemoth who kills people. So it's not about who wants it more. It's about, can you not die?
Yeah, exactly. Dude, so let's talk about the behemoths who kill people in this movie. So I thought Ivan Drago, who is the villain from Rocky IV, if you're familiar with the Rocky franchise, I thought Drago was actually the most sympathetic and interesting character in the whole movie, which removed and ruined a fundamental element from the success of any Rocky movie, which is that you have to hate the opponent. Drago was totally sympathetic because his wife, Brigitte Nielsen, left him high and dry after he lost to Rocky in 1985 on the night that Rocky ended the Cold War. So apparently Brigitte Nielsen left Drago and his son high and dry, such that, like, you ended up feeling really sorry for them in Creed 2. Did you have this experience? Like, did you feel like things for them that you probably shouldn't have been feeling?
Yeah, I mean, it was either him or Victor.
Yeah.
Like, to me, Victor Drago, so the son, was the most sympathetic because, like, Ivan Drago had his moment of glory and lost it completely unjustified because he lost a fight. That should be that's an aspect of any athlete's career.
Right.
But because it was also like the fall of the USSR, they blamed him more or less.
Exactly.
His son lost a mom, lost a home, and then his dad continues to pile that crap on him throughout the entire movie until like the last few scenes when it's like he realizes he's about to lose his son too.
Yeah.
And then he becomes a father, and there's that sort of just glimpse at the end when they're running together, which is a really different thing. But again, it was sort of ham-handed how they did it. It
was, yeah, for sure.
But so speaking of Ivan and Victor Drago, did you catch in the first fight Max Kellerman, who, by the way, should never be allowed anywhere near a movie? He was the most annoying character in the entire
Thank you for saying that, man. My wife hates Max Kellerman, and I'm not sure why. But she just has this long-standing beef with Max Kellerman because of all the boxing I used to watch like years ago when I was doing boxing writing, and she just didn't like him. She thought he was smug and arrogant. But in the film, Kellerman acted as sort of like the chorus. Like, if this was a Shakespeare play, Kellerman would be the chorus, in that he's providing all this like ham-fisted exposition. It was terrible. It was just terrible.
Just to be very trite, his voice makes me want to stab my ears with a pencil.
Yeah.
It's just the worst voice. But in the very first fight, he got the name wrong.
Yeah, I noticed that.
He said Ivan Drago. He's like, Ivan Drago out here throwing haymakers, and I was like, that was 30 years ago.
Dude, right. And I'm like, is that just like an editing gaffe in the movie, or did they leave that in there for some kind of intentional reason?
I think it was an edit. I think they just made a mistake.
Yeah.
Because, they just missed it, which the whole movie felt like an editing gaffe to me, because the performances by the non-Rocky leads were really strong.
Yeah, I agree.
So the Dragos, the Creeds, strong.
Yep.
Rocky, not strong, but I don't put that on him because we all know exactly who Sylvester Stallone is.
Yeah.
And so that's a screenwriting and directorial thing.
Yeah.
And this one didn't have Ryan Coogler involved in it.
Yeah.
Well, I think he was an executive producer, but I think he was heavily involved in Black Panther when this movie was being made. Or being shot. And so it just didn't have any sort of, there was no soft touch at any point.
Right, no subtlety.
And it suffered from it, let's say.
No, it definitely did. Yeah, the script was a mess, man. The whole thing was like 20 minutes too long. You know what it felt like? It felt like a Clippers game in the early 2000s when like they had all those great players, but they always got eliminated from the playoffs with like a month left to go in the season. And, it's like they still have to go out and play the games.
You're like, man, Quentin Richardson hit 6 threes while wearing the awesome headband, and Darius Miles was everywhere, and still just not that good.
And they still lost by 12, and like nobody's heart was in it. And that's what this felt like. This felt like a movie that you had to make, but like nobody really believed in it. Like, I envisioned Michael B. Jordan getting 2/3 of the way through like shooting Creed 2 and going, yeah, this is going to be hot garbage. Like, I think he knew in his heart of hearts that he had made a bad movie. So this begs the question, and I want to run this by you, because I want to compare it to what happened in our theater. So our theater was pretty full, and at the end of the movie, you know, the last fight happened, the credits came up, and there were a couple of beats where everybody just sat there, and then somebody started clapping tepidly, and then a few other people clapped tepidly, because I think the cultural expectation is that you clap at the end of a Rocky movie. But even that, nobody's heart was in it. You know, again, it was like the 2001 Clippers in terms of the clapping.
Right.
And it was just a funny moment where it's like everybody in the theater wanted to feel a certain way about the movie, but we were just trying to kind of convince each other that we felt that way. Did anything happen in your theater after the movie?
Not after, although in the last fight scene, there was a few like audible cheers, you know. Yeah. And the last fight, I will say they shot the fight scenes pretty well. Yeah. You know, sports, they've gotten good at shooting sports movies.
They have.
And also, to actors' credits, they have gotten a lot better at sort of fully investing in being an athlete.
Right.
You know, so Michael B. Jordan, for example, did an excessive amount of training, both physically and as a boxer, to be able to pull it off.
Dude, he looked incredible.
Which makes a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
And but so there was some audible cheers, you know, with, you know, the when he almost doesn't make it up on the 10 count and the knockdowns and etc. But yeah, no clapping afterwards. It got done, and it was just sort of like, you know, the drone of like, all right, well, time to go home. It's 9:45.
Exactly.
And it was just, that was it. It was very flat.
Yeah, very, very flat for sure. So do you think this is the end of the franchise? And if so, are you okay with that?
Well, to answer the second half of the question first, I don't have nearly the emotional investment in the Rocky franchise that some people do.
Yeah.
You know, seen them, but I think you almost have to be part of a community of people who are invested in Rocky, or like have people you share this with, where it's a bonding experience for that to be deeply rooted.
Yeah.
And I think I've watched all but one of them by myself. So,
oh, wow.
Well, I mean,
that's
not the Creed movies, but like they were just like, oh, I'll watch it on Netflix or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, and also I wasn't really watching them when they were being released.
Dude, see, I think
it was kind of way out.
I think you had the unfortunate like chronology of Rocky really started to suck kind of right as you were entering into like movie watching age. So, you know, by the time you were old enough to watch movies, especially growing up in the Piper household, like Rockies 1 through 5 had already been made.
So like 30.
Yeah, 30. So like 4 years ago. Yeah. But most of the Rockies, you know, all the good ones had already been made. Rocky 5 was garbage. But yeah, when those movies were popping like in real time, I was seeing them in real time. And then Rocky 4 became like the VHS tape that you popped in whenever you had like a sleepover with dudes, like in middle school. You know, there were a couple of go-to movies. That was one of them. So I probably viewed Rocky 4 like 50 times in my childhood.
I'll also say when I watched the first Rocky, I think I didn't watch it till I was in college.
Yeah.
So what, early 2000s?
Yeah.
Which is way after it came out.
Yep.
I didn't know what I was watching.
Yeah.
I thought it was a boxing movie because I was familiar with the Rocky franchise at that point, and it had become sort of a heavyweight boxing franchise.
Yeah.
Rocky, like the first Rocky, is not a boxing movie.
It's not, man. The first Rocky is so good, by the way.
It's it is, unless you're expecting to watch a boxing movie.
Yeah, that's true. There's only like 10 minutes of boxing in it, you know?
and I was like, there's nothing happening.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of weird characters. It's very dark. It's slow.
Dude, it has the old movie pacing. Yeah, it has old-timey movie pacing where it's really slow.
And so I hated it.
Yeah.
Which I hated it in the way that an ignorant movie viewer hates, which is
sure.
I hated it for what it wasn't.
Yeah. Yep.
Instead of appreciating it for what it was.
Yep. No, I get that, man. I get that, and I've been there a lot. But yeah, really, I mean, the first Rocky, phenomenal film. They probably got progressively worse after that, and even Rocky IV, for being such a cultural, you know, kind of object, it was hot garbage. I mean, it's a really bad movie. Like if you watch Rocky IV, it's all of like 92 minutes long, and like 70 minutes of that is montage. It's really, really bad, but it's a fun movie to watch when you're...
That's kind of what Creed 2 felt like.
Yeah.
It felt like it was like one-liner, slow motion.
Yeah.
montage.
Yeah.
You know, and the music they used was not, I mean, there was nothing subtle about this movie.
Yeah.
Nothing remotely subtle. It was very, very in your face. I doubt this is the end.
Yeah.
Because if they can rope like Coogler back in, although I don't really know where they go from here, unless
like who does he fight?
Unless there's is there like a Creed 3 where their child grows up to be like Layla Ali or something like that?
Yeah, we're gonna have to wait like 15 years for that kid to grow up and become a fighter. But Rocky will still be looking waxen and tan and like an ex-bodybuilder at age 104. I don't know, man. I think I'm okay with this being the end of it. I really am. And, as someone who like grew up with the Rocky franchise and who really rides with those movies, like I imagine, like I hate Star Wars movies. Like I'm just not interested, but the people who are really passionate about it, like I'm that passionate about the Rocky movies. And I'm okay with this being the last one. Like I would rather see them be done than make another bad one like this. Because it's a matter of expectations. It's like being a passionate fan of a team and then going out and seeing that team suck. You feel let down. You feel, like you wasted your time or your money or whatever. So I'd rather see him like just shut it down. This isn't like an embarrassing one to end on. Like it wasn't just a disaster. It was just not good. And
especially when paired with the first Creed, which was a really good movie.
So
I mean,
good.
They did after what was it was Rocky 5 called Rocky 5 or was it called Rocky Balboa?
Dude, so Rocky 5 was called Rocky 5 and Rocky 6 was called Rocky Balboa, which is actually low-key good. But I think that one being low-key good was even a matter of expectations in that I expected absolutely nothing from that movie. Like I had zero expectations for Rocky Balboa because of how bad Rocky 5 was. And it was actually pretty okay. Like it was kind of cool.
But it was kind of a nothing movie in terms of cultural significance.
It was very
clearly
movie.
Like, we're just going to make something that's a money grab.
Dude, right. It didn't come out at Christmas. It wasn't like this big hyped up thing. It just kind of happened, Yeah.
So they did successfully breathe life into the franchise with a fresh storyline, fresh face, good performances. This wasn't a great movie to end with, but like you said at the beginning, like we only have two options, and one is it changed my life, and the other is it deserves to be flushed down the toilet.
Yeah.
And it falls firmly in like it's lukewarm leftovers.
Dude, right,
It's just kind of eh.
Right. And man, I just think culturally we need to refine that gear. We need to be okay with something being like neither life-changing nor miserable. It can be somewhere in between. And I wonder if it's
considering that's most of life, actually.
Dude, right. And this kind of dovetails nicely, I think, with the book that you're writing, vis-a-vis expectations and vis-a-vis just how we talk about things. Because, social media, I think, has created this environment where like, if the meal isn't amazing, we're not photographing it, we're not talking about it. So like if it goes on social media, it's just like this transcendent experience, or we want people to think that it was. Whereas, most of the time, the game that you've bought a ticket to, or the movie that you've decided to like go and watch on Thanksgiving, it's not transcendent. It's just 2 hours.
I've watched hundreds of professional sports games in my life live, and then hundreds and hundreds more on TV, and almost none of them are memorable.
Dude, right? Yeah.
But that doesn't have anything to do with enjoying the experience.
Dude, it's funny, man. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because as I look back on like all the games that I've watched in my life, almost none of them are memorable, but the ones that are memorable because of some sort of outside thing that happened. Like I remember one time, I used to go to one Colts game every year with my dad. My pops would shell out for like one pair of Colts tickets every year. Sometimes it was preseason. Sometimes we'd get lucky and we'd catch a regular season game. But I remember one time they played the Raiders at the Hoosier Dome, and it was right toward the end of Jerry Rice's career when he was with the Raiders. And we had gone down low to watch warm-ups, and there were these like kind of drunk hillbilly Indiana white dudes who apparently had like been at a bar with Jerry Rice the night before, and Jerry had let them like try on his Super Bowl rings. And it was this great moment between these like just quintessential central Indiana drunk dudes screaming at Jerry like, hey, like basically, hey, do you remember us from last night? Do you remember when we tried your ring on? And of course, Jerry Rice was like 100% dialed in on the game. But it's little things like that. I remember one time we saw the Colts play the Patriots at the Hoosier Dome, and again, this was like late 80s, early 90s when fan player interactions were different. But we were down right by that rail watching warm-ups, and one of the Patriots players like turned around and tossed a football up at me and like played catch for a couple of minutes with me in the stands. And I just thought, man, this is the greatest thing in the world. So I couldn't tell you the scores of any of those games, but little experiences with pops and the weird fans and, just all that stuff, I think is what gets kind of cemented.
And that's the thing is like a sports game is not a memorable thing.
Right.
There are like snapshots that are.
Yeah.
So sure. I remember moments from games. I remember the one foul ball I caught at a Twins game.
Yeah.
I remember, those kinds of things. The one time we were screaming at somebody from the left field bleachers and got him to turn around and wave at us. That
yeah,
kind of
exactly,
thing.
Man. Yep.
But like you said, like I couldn't tell you who was pitching those days.
Right.
I couldn't tell you the score. I can tell you the Twins probably lost because it was at a time when they did that
frequently.
Most of the time.
Yeah.
And but just not a lot. Those experiences are not supposed to be permanently life-changing things, nor is Creed 2.
Yeah.
It's just supposed to be really fun for 2 hours, or at least like moderately fun for 2 hours.
Dude, moderately fun, escapist. And I'll tell you, Creed 2 did deliver on that level. Like, it was totally something to do. And yeah, if I had squeezed it into an already busy day, or if I felt like full of expectation, I may have been like legitimately pissed that it wasn't good. But yeah, I was not at all pissed. I just felt like, this was not as good as it could have been. And it's funny. Like now that I'm a dad, I think I want the games that I take my kids to be more transcendent than I expected them to be as a kid. Because as a dad, you're shelling out all that money and you pile the kids into the car and you're like, I want them to feel the buzz like walking into the stadium that I felt when I was a kid. But like, you can't create it. You can't make that thing happen. And I think the best experience I've ever had at a football game with Maxim, my younger son. So we used to live in Michigan. This was right before we moved south. And there was a college football program in Michigan. They're in the MAC, Eastern Michigan. And at the time, they had won like 2 games in the previous decade. Like they'd had a bunch of 0-for seasons and they were terrible. Mm-hmm. But they would advertise on the radio a whole bunch, and their tickets were they were literally giving the tickets away. And there was one Saturday where I woke up and it was like 55 and sunny, and I just threw Maxim in the car and we drove to Eastern Michigan with my dad. And there were like 4 people in the stands, and they basically let us in for free. They let us sit on the front row. They gave us like a Jimmy John's sandwich, and they seemed just like thrilled that we were there. And so Maxim basically had like the Northern Illinois mascot to himself, and Pops and I could listen close enough to hear like what the coaches were saying to the players on the sidelines. And it was an amazing experience watching this like monumentally crappy team, but which tip of the cap to Eastern Michigan. They've been bowl eligible the last 2 years. So they have turned it around, but yeah, that was one of our best sports experiences, and it just kind of fell in our laps.
I think trying to create memories for your kids it's much more shotgun method than sniper method.
Yeah, that's a good point.
In terms of like, you just got to try a bunch of stuff because my kids bring up the most random things that were meaningful to them, or the random part of something, that meant nothing to me.
Yeah.
And sports are the same way, where you want them to have a transcendent experience and like see a no-hitter or see a guy rush for 250 yards or see a field goal to win it with no time on the clock. And in the end, it's like a 24-7 game, right, and it's slogged through the mud. And what they remember is, the one guy who tossed him a football, or the coach who high-fived him on the way by, or whatever.
Yep.
Which is just as valuable.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, you're right. That's a good word. The shotgun approach more than the sniper approach. I think that that's a great one for sure. But Piper, speaking of transcendent sporting experiences, our very own Mike Conley Jr. of the Memphis Grizzlies recently had what was the record that he broke? It was most assists in a quarter. He had like 10 assists in like 10 minutes of basketball the other night against the Clippers, and this guy is like quietly having one of the best seasons of he is having the best season of his career. He's playing great basketball, and you wanted to talk about him. So what do you want to say about Mike Conley Jr.?
So I was watching the Timberwolves play the Grizzlies a few games ago, and the Grizzlies are, somehow, some way they keep going with a very grit and grind style. Yeah. Just counter every NBA culture. Yep. They slow it down. They beat people up. Mike Conley is unbelievable.
Yeah, he's really good.
I don't think he's. Has he made an All-Star game?
I don't think he has, which is more a function of like, who else is making the All-Star game ahead of him.
Yeah, I mean, when you play in a conference with Chris Paul and Steph Curry and James Harden and Kevin, whoever else, all the guards, it's very hard. But just watching him play, the thing that he made me think of was like watching Emmitt Smith play running back. Yeah. Because Emmitt Smith was not fast. He wasn't overpowering.
Yep.
He was a great athlete, but it was the kind of athlete where you have to pay real close attention to see where it shows up in terms of like timing and agility.
Yep.
And the way that he uses his brakes instead of his acceleration.
Yep.
And Conley's never moving fast, and he's getting by people, and he's got this ridiculous little floater game, which is, he's a good shooter. Yeah. He's a good finisher around the rim, but he just does some weird, unorthodox stuff. And I don't know. I was blown away because it was sort of the first time I'd watched him play in a long time for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
And thought this man is a wizard.
Yeah. No, it's really impressive. And I think if you're a fan of a program like the Grizzlies, like that's what you go to the games for. You know what I mean? You go to the games because you can occasionally see a transcendent performance out of one of your guys, and it helps if you like the guy. And this is especially true in the NBA now, where like really there are only like 3 or 4 teams who realistically can even think about like winning the title from year to year. So, there's all these other cities with NBA teams, and you got to have a reason to go watch, right? Like you got to have a guy or two on your team that you enjoy watching, and you can bring your kids out to watch them, and yeah, like we said, hope to have that transcendent experience where the guy has really dials it in and has a great night or whatever. And I think for me, like that's more how I watch the NBA, and I know you watch because of the Timberwolves, and you're a fan, but you're a fan of the game as well. And for me, I really don't have a team per se that I care that much about, but I have individual guys that I like watching.
And Conley, I think so. He came to mind especially because I was trying to think of any other player in the NBA who is less appreciated compared to how good they are.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I wonder why.
The only other one who comes to mind is maybe like Paul Millsap, but I think he's sort of on the backside of his career.
Yeah.
And he kind of earned the title of underrated for a while.
Yeah.
Where it was he's the most underrated player in the NBA. And once you're the most underrated, well, you're kind of properly rated.
Yeah, exactly.
And so Conley is just, I mean, it's hard to come up with like 6 or 7 point guards who are better than he is.
Yeah, exactly. Dude, so this begs the question, why hasn't one of those like super teams made a run at Conley? Like why hasn't he been a guy that that's been sort of that in demand, I guess. He's just been kind of mired in this Memphis situation where the team is perennially around 500 and not interesting, and he's just kind of stuck there. You know what I mean?
I think it's for a couple reasons. One is it's sort of a heyday for point guards in the NBA right now, and has been for a couple of years, where there's only 1 or 2 teams that have bad point guards.
Yeah, that's true.
Most teams have... it's hard to say most teams have above average point guards because that sort of breaks the idea of average. Yeah. But they have point guards that would have been considered above average 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, just in terms of what's valued in the NBA, 3-point shooting and wing play.
Yeah.
And so Memphis's 2 best players are probably the 2 most undervalued positions in the NBA, and that's point guard and center.
Yeah.
And yet, I mean, they make it work. They're still competitive. I think they were in the top 2 or 3 in the West as of the past week.
Right.
And but that's the other thing is you look at it and you're like, I mean, if you put him on the Timberwolves instead of Jeff Teague, they're a playoff team.
Yeah, that's true.
As currently construed,
that's true.
He takes over the Jimmy Butler role of star.
Yeah.
He's a level head. He's a great teammate.
Right.
His young teammates would play better because of him. He makes everybody better.
Yeah.
And he knows exactly how much to kind of impose himself on the game in terms of scoring and forcing the game. If you put him on Denver, same thing.
Yeah.
Because a bunch of young talented guys with no real good point guard play.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing across the NBA. You look at this, you're like, he would make at least 20 out of the 30 teams better right off the bat if you just swap point guards.
Yeah, that's true.
And he's not. And I think the only reason that doesn't happen is because he's paid a lot of money.
Yeah, that's true, man. And also Memphis they've not fully committed to the tanking rebuild model that a lot of teams have. So I'm afraid Conley is just going to kind of be mired there for a while.
So here's the thing. Tanking is a way to win a title.
Yeah.
And if you're playing the zero-sum game of you either win a title or you fail, then tanking makes sense. Yeah. If you're in a city like Memphis, where you go, we don't have the TV money to kind of be flush. We're not going to attract free agents based on anything the market has to offer. So that leaves us the option of tanking and really hoping we get great draft picks, or just persistently being competitive.
Yeah.
I think they've made the right choice. They've kind of done what Indiana has done, where they never want to fully tank. They want to be around 500 or better every year.
Yeah. And maybe you figure, if we can get to the tournament and we stay healthy and the other teams have some injuries, we've got a puncher's chance,
and I think they've just looked at it and been like, it's the breaks of the game to win a championship in some ways, or it's a super team era. Well, we're never going to be a super team. So, but the it's not that the only other alternative is win 22 games and try to get a top 5 pick.
Yeah.
And so they're persistently 40 to 49 wins.
Yep.
And just slugging away.
Yeah.
And
dude, slugging away,
fans,
drawing decently, Yeah.
But they wouldn't draw decently if they were like, guess what? We're trading away Marc Gasol and Mike Conley for a bunch of first-round picks, so Jaren Jackson is going to be the star of our team. Yeah. They'd have 4,000 fans there every game for about 3 years.
Dude, you're right. It would be a tough hang. I mean, it'd be a tough slog for a while. Which really begs the question, Piper, and this is fascinating to me. And I don't know the answer to this. And if I was a GM, I don't know that I would know how to handle this. Is it a zero-sum game? Because I think from the fans' perspective and just the narratives that we've grown up with, the narrative is always like a new guy signs with a team, whether it's a coach or a GM or whatever, and the narrative is always, well, I'm here to win a title. And it's like, well, yeah, at some level, of course you are. You're here to win a title. You're here to win every game. But in a very real way, if you're a GM, you're trying not to get fired. And if continuing to win and put a good product on the floor with regard to the limitations that you have in your market, if that gets you not fired, then at some level, aren't you doing a good job? I don't know. And I guess in the media, you have to say that it's a zero-sum game and you have to say that we're here to win a title. But yeah, if you're continuing to win more than you lose and you're not getting fired, I mean, it's kind of the Marvin Lewis model, right? He's been the Bengals head coach for 150 years, and he's gone 7-9 or 9-7 every season.
Yeah, I think his best year was 11 wins, and his worst year has been 6-ish, 7-ish. But yeah, he's almost always in that 2 games over to 2 games under.
If you're a Marvin Lewis apologist, you say to yourself, he took over this moribund franchise. The Bengals were terrible, and he made them relevant. And every year they're pretty relevant. They're always in the wild card conversation. They're not an easy out. Andy Dalton is Andy Dalton. They've got AJ Green, who's a superstar. Like, they're relevant, but at the end of the day, do you go to the mattresses for Marvin Lewis as being a great coach? Probably not. Which begs another question that you teased, I think, off the air. Like, is Jim Harbaugh a good coach? Kind of looping back around to the Michigan conversation of
in college football, it's absolutely a zero-sum game unless you coach at Iowa.
Dude, right. At a place like Michigan, it's a zero-sum game. At a place like Iowa, it's not.
Kirk Ferentz just got a $500,000 bonus for winning 8 games.
Dude, and I honestly think Kirk Ferentz is a great coach. Like, I think he's a great coach because
they win 8 games every single year.
Dude, every single year they win 8 games.
10 or 12.
Yeah, occasionally they have their magical, like, 10 or 12 win season at Iowa. You're not in a recruiting hotbed. You're not in, like, a destination city. It's Iowa. And for that guy to have done what he's done there with the kind of consistency with which he's done it, I think that makes him a great coach. Now, it is a zero-sum game at Michigan. At Michigan, if you haven't, like, competed for a national championship in 4 or 5 years, like, you're done. So
to be fair, Michigan hasn't competed for a national championship since, like, Charles Woodson was there.
Dude, that's true.
And have they even sniffed it since then?
I don't know that they've sniffed it. I would have to
how
look.
long ago was that? 20 years?
Dude, that was 20 years ago. Yeah. Which, to be fair, like, as an older person, it doesn't feel like that long ago to me, but it really was. That was a long time ago, and I think the sort of DNA of college football has changed in that I think it's a little harder to recruit to Michigan in 2018 than it was in 1998. In that in 1998 you were still close to Bo Schembechler. There was still this, like, ethos of Michigan as this elite program. It was pre, like, streaming games. It was pre, like, there's a game on every day. Like, Michigan was on national TV almost every weekend, and it made them magical in a way that they are not now. Same with Nebraska. I mean, Nebraska now is just a huge school in the middle of a cornfield with a huge stadium, and they have trouble recruiting and they have trouble winning, whereas in 1988 or even 1995, like, going to Nebraska was a huge deal. That meant that you're playing on ABC every weekend, and Brent Musburger was calling your games, and it was a huge thing in a way that it's not now. So yeah, it'll be interesting to me. The Michigan fan base is just vicious, and they were vicious with Harbaugh in the offseason, and they kind of, like, reached détente with him during the season because he was so successful this year. But I think it's going to be brutal for him tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, I think you praised Kirk Ferentz for being a consistent winner at Iowa.
Yeah.
I grew up in Minnesota. The difference between the University of Iowa and the University of Minnesota is negligible.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
There's literally no difference.
Right.
And in fact, Minnesota ought to have an advantage.
Dude, Minnesota's in a way cooler city.
Yeah, because at least it's a sort of a major metro area with some cool culture. Granted, the weather's not really worse. There's nothing worse about it.
Right.
And Minnesota's just a dog of a football team and has been, with the exception of, the Glenn Mason years and, like, 1 or 2 Jerry Kill years where they were, like, 8 or 9 win teams.
Yeah.
So Michigan needs to realize that's them.
Yeah.
Like, they still identify themselves. They're like the guy who's 27 years old wearing his high school varsity letter jacket.
Dude, that's
Michigan.
There's a ton
right
of
now.
truth to that. But that fan base is so, and I say this with a great deal of affection because I like Michigan football. Like, the fan base is so arrogant. Like, they still think of themselves as the top of the top, the elite of the elite. And I mean, I think these programs that have been able to take a dip and then kind of reimagine themselves are the ones that are able to adapt and do better. Like, look at Miami's not having a great season this year, but Miami as a program they've had all these peaks and valleys, but they do continue to get back up. And I think hiring the guy that they hired was a good
Mark Richt.
Hiring Mark Richt was a good hire.
Who is another guy who persistently was really good at Georgia, but since it's a zero-sum game, he got fired.
Dude, right.
Because he couldn't he was like 10-2, won his division in the SEC regularly, couldn't get past Alabama. You know who else can't get past Alabama? The rest of the country.
Yeah, the entire world, for sure. Dude, so
and I mean, I guess he struggled with beating Urban Meyer when he was at Florida. I mean, he couldn't beat the elite of the elite, but persistently really good
Dude,
teams.
So here's my thing, and I want to get your take on this. Like, if we were football coaches, Piper, and let's say we had just won like the MAC championship, and we just had some magical year at Eastern Michigan, and all these Division I programs came calling. I think the ideal job to have would be one of these non-zero-sum game programs where you go, you make it better, you win consistently, and you become a legend at like an Iowa or a Northwestern or a Syracuse. So I'm a Syracuse fan, and we have Dino Babers, who I think is a fantastic coach, really creative, really interesting guy, great motivator. He won 9 games this year, and conventional wisdom would say that Dino Babers is going to ditch us to go to some, Texas A&M type program. Some program with like a little bit more prestige and more visibility, like USC, But USC is a zero-sum game program where, unless you win 10 games every year and you're...
And in fact, at this point, it might just be a zero program.
Right.
Like, it's just... It's completely irrelevant.
Yeah.
Again, they're living.
It's perception.
They're living on the memory of Matt Leinart. Congratulations,
dude. Exactly. Which that was dang near 15 years ago. Pipe. It may have been 15 years ago.
Yes, it was. When all of your best players from those college teams are now calling NFL games on television because they've retired. Right. That tells you how long ago it was.
Absolutely, dude. So for me, I think getting one of these zero-sum game or non-zero-sum game type jobs in a city or a metro area that you like, I think that would be tip top, man. And so a guy like Pat Fitzgerald, who stayed at Northwestern, or Kirk Ferentz, who stayed at Iowa, like, tip of the cap to those guys, because at any point they could have bolted for like a bigger, more prestigious job. But I think they got a pretty good thing going, and that's the kind of thing I would want. So the question you ask yourself is, does that make you sort of less uber competitive? Does it make you less of an alpha dog to say, I want to stay at Syracuse and win 8 or 9 games every year and be a legend, rather than like going to, Florida State to try to keep them in the national title discussion every year?
No, I mean, I think it makes you realistic.
Yeah.
Like you have to look around and go, okay, well, yes, there is that level of potential success, along with all the crap that goes with it. Which means you probably get 3 years in a major program, and if you haven't sniffed a championship in 3 years, you're on thin ice. And but then you look around, and you go, there are only 100 and something major conference college football coaching jobs in the world. And if you get one of those and you have success there, you are one of the elite college coaches. You're one of the elite football coaches in the world. And if it's a place where, like, Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern is a great example because he's an alum. Didn't he go there?
Yeah, he went there. He was a great linebacker in the early 90s.
He was a middle linebacker. For some reason, I froze for a second. But yeah, so he played middle linebacker there. He was on like the Darnell Autry team, like the team that just sort of randomly popped up as a
went to the Rose Bowl
conference champion. And why would he leave?
Right.
If he can win 8 to 10 games at Northwestern consistently, a school that has significant athletic disadvantages,
right?
He is a legend. He's going to be their winningest coach if he keeps this up. He's going to be in their Hall of Fame. He will be loved by a ton of rich alums and have a post-football career for as long as he wants it. And if he would step back and look at the grand scheme of things, he would say, that was an awesome career, and I wasn't less competitive. I didn't settle for Northwestern.
Right.
I made something fantastic out of my career. I wish more coaches would look at it that way. like Scott Frost going to Nebraska, he's an alum, so that made sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense.
But like, if he had gone to USC, like, why?
Yeah.
You're winning at was it Central Florida?
Right. You're living in a pretty nice place, living at Central Florida. You'd be a legend there for the rest of your life, And
at some point, if you keep winning there, you become sort of the Gonzaga of college football,
right.
where Gonzaga went from mid-major Cinderella to, no, they're just one of the best programs in college basketball.
Yeah.
Like, he could have done that at Central Florida. And instead, he's now got to try to do it at Nebraska with all of the Tom Osborne shadow.
Dude, the Osborne shadow, all
him.
The pressure, like all these fans and alums who still have this like misguided vision of the program as this sort of legendary thing that it's not anymore. Yeah, I feel really bad for Harbaugh. Like, I feel like they're going to want to put his head on a stake tomorrow morning, and I'm not sure it's fair. That being said, though, what do you do with a guy like that who has gotten your program close but not quite over the hump? You're not beating the bitter, hated rival that everyone in your fan base is obsessed with beating every year. Like, Michigan they didn't even sniff being in that game today, really. I mean, they got lucky at the end of the first half. A couple of things went their way, but they weren't even playing the same game today. So what do you do with that? Like, do you fire Jim Harbaugh and start at ground zero again? Or do you go, well, this guy's coaching a Super Bowl. He clearly can do this. Do we give him more time? I just don't even know,
Well, and that's the thing is, you also look at Harbaugh and you go, he had a run of success between, was it San Diego, University of San Diego, Stanford, and then the 49ers. But it was all with a certain brand of football that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Nobody plays that kind of football.
Right.
Not at the NFL level, not at the successful college programs. Like, Alabama doesn't even play that kind of football anymore. And they were the last one to just sort of ground and pound you.
Right.
Because they could.
Well, and dude, there's a scarcity even of kids to play that kind of football. Like, where do you recruit a kid that's been in a 3-point stance? I mean, all these high school kids and junior high kids, they're all playing in spreads ever since Pee Wee. I mean, there are linemen in this country who have never been in a 3-point stance, and you're going to try to teach them a new game,
There's a reason why every year Wisconsin puts their entire starting 5 offensive line into the NFL, because they're like, he's a large human who knows how to run block.
Yeah, that's right.
We'll take him.
Dude, if I was an offensive lineman with any kind of size and pro potential, I would go to Wisconsin, and it wouldn't even be close. Like, if you want to play on Sundays, you have to go to a Wisconsin or an Iowa or one of these programs.
Notre Dame. Notre Dame's another one.
Yeah.
Where they consistently put grunt players into the NFL.
Dude, but there's only a handful of these programs anymore.
Right.
And so Harbaugh is trying to, you're trying to find guys to do a thing that nobody's doing anymore. And I do think it presents at some level a weird opportunity, but yet, the whole thing hinges on linemen. And if you can't shop for linemen, like if you can't find those guys that you need to do that thing, I mean, it's why Nebraska was so great in the 80s and 90s, because every high school program was running the veer, and, you could find all kinds of huge behemoths who, could bench press 400 pounds and could run block because everybody was doing the same stuff.
And when you had a 280-pound guard who was slow, that was okay because the defensive tackles were the same. Like, there wasn't guys running 4.5s on the defensive line.
Yeah.
I think the game has just shifted. I think Harbaugh needs to end up at a place where expectations are just lower.
Yeah.
Where if you win, you're appreciated, but expectations are just lower.
Yeah.
And like, because Michigan, to be the head coach of Michigan, given the expectations, it's like a CEO position.
It really is, man.
At Stanford, he got to just wear his ugly khakis and teach guys how to block and run. And to be fair, his best years at Stanford, I think, were also Andrew Luck years. So,
well, yeah, and at Stanford, everybody was super pumped if you won 8 games. Like the bar was significantly lower, which is
it's like Northwestern West.
Right. It is a great academic school, super elite in that way, which Michigan is too. But with Michigan, it's just that you have the added baggage and burden of all these expectations of what people think the program is. And I would not want to coach at a place like that, man. I think I would want to coach somewhere else. So yeah, with these guys like, even like Lane Kiffin coming up at Florida Atlantic, it's like he's going to be successful there. And then he's going to bolt for some, crappy zero-sum game kind of job, and he's going to be right back on the same cycle that he was on before. So, yeah, it really is a miserable kind of nomadic existence for these guys. Because if you're Harbaugh, like, let's say you get fired by Michigan, like, where do you go from here? Do you do like a couple of years sort of sojourn into the NFL as an assistant? Maybe you go work for your brother. I don't know. I don't know what that looks like, but I would not want the burden of another one of these elite, quote unquote elite programs. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what would make a ton of sense for him is one of these other like big universities that's not a football powerhouse to throw money at him. Like like Texas Tech.
Yeah.
Who's probably going to fire Cliff Kingsbury, I would think, because their offense is always great and the team wins 5 games.
Right.
Or Baylor, one of these schools that has money, they have boosters they can pay.
Right.
But success for them is not measured on championships. It's measured on, can we be a lot better than we've been?
Yeah.
And I think Harbaugh would turn those around in a heartbeat.
Dude, or Louisville, right? You get to come and follow the like Bobby Petrino gong show. Expectations are low. They got a big stadium. They're right in the South. Like there are a lot of reasons why that could be an attractive job for somebody. But yeah, it'll be interesting, man. It's always interesting to see where these guys.
Harbaugh should stay 1,000 miles away from the SEC, though.
Yeah,
I think that would be just an awful idea.
That's true. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah, Louisville's in the ACC, but still, like, just the proximity.
No, I was just thinking of other programs that like Arkansas. Would be the kind of program where he could have success. But I'm like, oh wait, if you have any success in the SEC, you get vacuumed, like just sucked into that conversation of championships instead of being satisfied with 8 to 10 wins.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Piper, I am satisfied with the almost hour of good radio that we've done here on the Happy Rant Sports program. So always a pleasure, my friend. I enjoy chopping these things up with you conversationally, and I hope the fans enjoy it as well. So we have not done this in a while, and it just occurred to me to do it. If you have not gone to our iTunes page to leave a 5-star review, you should do so post-haste. That'll just be the Happy Rant Show page. We don't have a dedicated page yet for Happy Rant Sports, but go to the Happy Rant page, leave us a 5-star, leave us some fawning words. We're not interested in anything but a 5-star, just full disclosure. Not interested in constructive feedback at this stage of our lives, but the 5 stars do help, so do go and do that if you feel so moved. And until next time, Piper, what's our sign-off? I feel like it should be a late 90s or an early 2000s like USC player or Michigan player in honor of this.
Big fat running back for USC, Lindale White.
Oh, I loved Lindale White, dude. He was my kind of running back for sure. So
yes,
Piper, we have wandered to and fro throughout this program and these topics. And until next time, Lindale White.
The Happy Rant is brought to you by Resonate Recordings. If you go to resonaterecordings.com, you can see the full range of services they offer. So if you're considering starting a podcast, they are the ones we recommend going with. Again, go to resonaterecordings.com to see their prices, to connect with them and ask any questions, and to see what they can do to help you launch, edit, master, and improve your podcast. Again, go to resonaterecordings.com to see what they can do to help you launch and improve your podcast.